Early in the 2015 primary season, the liberal candidate in the field, or the most liberal candidate in the field, Bernie Sanders, had a rally interrupted by Black Lives Matter protesters. He was caught off guard. I was too. Like a lot of liberals, I wondered, why are you picking on Bernie Sanders? Why wouldn't you interfere with a rally of Donald Trump's or Marco Rubio or even a Clinton rally? Wasn't Bernie the most likely candidate running to be sincerely sympathetic with the political issues that affect the black community? Bernie had been involved in civil rights demonstrations since 1962, and it seemed to me that he was hitting the right issues that affect the black community, about access to health care, living wage, the justice system. And in my middle-aged white man's mind, he just should have been the automatic favorite of black voters. And he said in response to the demonstrators who had taken the stage and stolen the microphone, he said just what I and a whole lot of other people mired in white privilege that kept us from being able to see the forest for the trees. He said, all lives matter. Well, all lives do matter. It seems like an inclusive and obvious and non-prejudiced thing to say. We're not trying to advocate for some kind of reverse racism, are we? Sure, black lives matter. Brown lives matter. White lives matter. It seemed innocent enough, but not very long after Bernie made that misstep, the Democratic National Committee sent letters to all candidates at all levels saying, never say in public, all lives matter, because it doesn't go down well. It's not that it isn't true, it is that it is so insensitive that it is culturally offensive. Because folks, there's never been a time when anyone doubted that white lives matter. You know, you hear people complaining about there being a gay pride march or whatever, and they're saying, when are we going to have the hetero pride? When was there ever a day you had to apologize for being heterosexual? When was there ever a day that you had to pretend that you weren't in order to get along with your family or your church or your community? We have pride festivals, we have these outreaches because it's something that isn't obvious and does need to be said. There's never been a time that you were discriminated against for being white. A little white girl goes missing, and the newspaper presses run hot. That white lives matter can never be seen so clearly as when an attractive white woman from an affluent family goes missing. Let a Lacey Peterson or a Natalie Holloway go missing, and the TV news cycle cannot let it go. When JonBenet Ramsey was killed, the search for the killer went on for 2 decades. Black and Latino women and girls go missing, and there's rarely more than a mention of it in the news. Gwen Ifill of PBS News fame even coined a phrase to describe it, missing white woman syndrome. And there is such a thing. The way the media treats it is just not the same. Not to say that abducting a white woman is not a horrible crime. It is. It's just that it's not one grain of sand more horrible than the abduction of a black woman or a brown woman. But you couldn't tell that from media coverage. All lives do matter. But when you say that, you are negating, diluting, or dismissing the necessary proclamation that black lives also matter. A fact that is not evident just by viewing social media or commercial media or in public conversation. At the current behest of our president, I can't say it. The NFL has recently enacted rules forbidding protest during the playing of the national anthem at football games. And Colin Kaepernick started this controversy a couple of years ago when he began taking a knee during the playing of the national anthem in protest of the number of unarmed black people who were being killed by the police. Now, he wasn't protesting the national anthem, although I wouldn't blame him if he did. A verse we never sing in public reminds African slaves that they'll be in their grave before they get to be free. I mean, there's some horribly racist stuff in our national anthem. We just tend to not sing that part out loud. But if he were protesting the anthem, I would get it. But he wasn't. He wasn't protesting the anthem. He wasn't disrespecting the flag. He wasn't trying to insult the nation. He was silently and respectfully protesting the inexplicable number of police killings of unarmed black women and men. It isn't just that Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Sam Du Bois, Philando Castile, Terrence Crutcher, Alton Sterling, Jamar Clark, Jeremy McDowell, Sandra Bland, Walter Scott, Eric Garner, and Tamir Rice were so unjustly murdered, it is that the police who kill them are rarely found guilty of any crime. Try shooting a whole list of unarmed white people and see if you get the same effect in the justice system. Just because you're stopped with a broken taillight doesn't mean that you're a dangerous person who needs to be shot 5 times in the back. We're being asked to be outraged by this protest, which has been judged to be unpatriotic. The president seems to almost be unable to manage his rage. Get that SOB off the field. And he just rage over this. But now, I'm no expert, but that looks unpatriotic to me. I mean, maybe it's just me, but that looks really unpatriotic. Now, which of these looks like a betrayal to America to you? And I'm not trying to bait you, but is this what's threatening America? Or is this what's threatening America? Well, am I alone here? Is this on? Kaepernick kneeling in quiet protest of an unspeakably racist problem in America looks patriotic to me. I mean, what is patriotism but someone who wants to strive to make America great or greater? Trump's inexplicable loyalty to the journalist murdering, political rival assassinating, national resource stealing dictator of Russia, that seems dangerous to me. Dangerous at a level that I am unashamed to call treason. So seriously, which of these SOBs ought to be thrown off the field again? Yeah. The mere fact that Kaepernick has not been allowed to define his own protest. I mean, he says he's protesting police killings, but Trump and others say that he's disrespecting the flag or disrespecting our country. And in response to this peaceful protest, he's been unemployed for the last 2 years. And this is a guy who was making, $15, $16 million a year. So he's lost $30 million of income, and he's still not changing. He's still not agreed to stand for the anthem. Now, guys, that's amazing. And I do want to remind you of something, just by contrast. During the 2016 campaign, Trump skipped a debate where he knew he would be humiliated, and instead he held a fundraiser to raise money for veterans' causes. It was a show of great patriotism. He's not a veteran, but he wants to identify with veterans. So he held this big fundraiser, and he persuaded his supporters to donate right at $6 million in this one-time fundraiser, which he declared to be the biggest of all time. Some months later, an investigative reporter tried to find out where he had donated the money, which charities, which veterans benefits, veterans programs had benefited. And you remember what he found out? Who had the money? Trump had the money. He kept the money. He kept the money. Donald J. Trump kept the money. He was hoping no one would notice. But only when he was publicly ridiculed did he actually donate money to charity, which happened the day it hit the papers. Now, do you see how white privilege works? Colin Kaepernick, a very wealthy black man, engages in peaceful protest of violent crimes, and he is ridiculed and his career is ruined. Trump tries to steal millions of dollars from a charity, and it hardly survived a 24-hour news cycle before we went on to the next embarrassing thing. Something that you probably didn't even remember. Something that doesn't even, when I see news media's listing the Trump scandals, his theft of $6 million of charitable donations doesn't even show up. But that would have gotten a black president impeached, wouldn't it? Would Obama have withstood raising $6 million for a veterans charity and been able to just shrug his shoulders about the fact that he tried to pocket it? The Donald can take this in stride. That's white privilege. A black motorist gets pulled over for having a burned out taillight and ends up dead. Trump, a self-described billionaire already, steals millions of dollars from his poor followers who had donated to a meaningful charity. So you see why Colin Kaepernick is kneeling, right? This is why Marissa Johnson took the microphone out of Bernie Sanders' hands. You have to see that these are not radical statements. These are peaceful, logical, meaningful statements. Now, I've been known in the past to give speeches at civil rights rallies, and one of my riffs that I go into is that it's fair to judge people by the same finish line as long as they have the same starting line. And for most of America's history, being born white means that you were virtually born on third base. But you don't look at the way things have been playing out lately and say that we're just having a problem with the same starting line. We're having a problem with the same finish line. That for persons of color in America today, overcoming perhaps poverty, bad schools, bad neighborhoods, whatever, still doesn't get you to the same finish line with everybody else that's running the race. There's still a tremendous number of incidents where the goalposts are constantly being moved. And it seems to upset people when this fact is held up to the public in media or in a public manner. Beyond the insulting counterclaim that all lives matter, another attempt at dismissing the Black Lives Matter movement was the Blue Lives Matter mantra in support of the police, who often lose their lives in the performance of their public duties. But has there ever been a time that anyone doubted that Blue Lives Matter? I'm not saying that they don't. I'm not saying that it's not a horrible thing when a policeman is killed in the line of duty, but has there ever been a time when a police officer was killed in the line of duty and the whole world didn't come to a stop? There's a motorcade. The mayor will come out and deliver soaring patriotic speeches at the memorial. There are helicopters hovering overhead giving live television coverage, and the whole city goes into mourning. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have these kinds of ceremonies. I'm just asking, where's the motorcade for Philando Castile, who got shot during a traffic stop for no apparent reason? Or Walter Scott, shot in the back while fleeing a traffic stop? Where was the mayor at their memorials? Where were the police in their formal uniforms standing at attention when his casket passed? Yeah, Blue Lives Matter, they do. And it's a tragedy when an officer is killed. But no one has ever questioned that. People only trot out the Blue Lives Matter to negate or dismiss the fact that Black Lives Matter. Talking to white people about white privilege is often quite similar to trying to talk to a fish about water. They have lived in it always, and they're not able to detect it. We've grown up in it, we've enjoyed it, we've unconsciously benefited from it, all the while insisting that it doesn't exist. Because you don't need me to tell you that being born white doesn't always feel like you've been born on third base. Nearly half of all white children are born into poverty. White kids often live in violent, drug-addicted, alcoholic, and dangerous homes where they are subjected to sexual violence and deprivations of all sorts. And yet, you would hardly find even one of those white kids that's been horribly abused in a terrible childhood who would be willing to trade places with a person of a different color, even if they were middle or upper class. Because consciously or unconsciously, white folk know that the color of their skin is oftentimes their get-out-of-jail-free card that gets arrests in their case to not be so frightening as it is if you're a person of color. You remember the story in the news last year about the woman who was pulled over by a traffic cop in Georgia, and she told Officer Greg Abbott that she was frightened and nervous because of what she had seen in the news about police killing people at police stops. And Officer Abbott, with his camera running, said, "But you're not black. Remember, we only kill black people, don't we?" Now, there may have been some bitter gallows humor there, but the storyline is familiar enough that everyone knows what he meant. You know, even jokes are always rooted in some existential experience, that he knew it was basically true. And this is a guy who's been pulling people over in Georgia for nearly 30 years. He didn't get this way last summer. This is a guy with a gun and a badge and lights and a siren who gets to pull people over in a state that has a very large minority population, and he's been doing this for a long time. Now, I know that most cops aren't racist. I know that most of them are not corrupt. And most don't have any serious problems with authority. But I'll tell you what I do believe. I believe that every single cop in the country knows which members of their police force are corrupt. They know which ones are mentally unstable, and they know which ones are racist. But this clear blue line of silence is such that they will protect their most corrupt members. Even the ones that they know good and well need to have their badge and gun taken from them. And until all cops start to report the ones that they know are the bad guys, I'm not going to stand up for the national anthem again.
Amen.
To paraphrase Forrest Gump, I'm no NFL quarterback, but I know what right and wrong is. Black people are trying to explain what it's like to be black in America. We don't have to shout back all lives matter or blue lives matter. In fact, truth is, we don't have to say anything at all. That's the hardest option for me. But they are trying to tell us what it's like to be black in America, and couldn't we just once just shut up and listen? That's an uncomfortable prescription for me, but it is what needs to happen. And we, people of conscience, need to lead the way. Racism is not an unsolvable problem. We just have to stop being so absurdly defensive. Just give up the microphone now and then. And when someone is protesting, don't tell them that they're protesting at the wrong time, or they're doing it the wrong way, or that it makes you uncomfortable. Just shut up and listen. We can get through this together. As Maya Angelou so beautifully said at Bill Clinton's first inauguration, so say the Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African and Native American, the Sioux, the Catholic, the Muslim, the French, the Greek, the Irish, the rabbi, the priest, the sheik, the gay, the straight, the preacher, the privileged, the homeless, the teacher, if you will study war no more, come clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the stone were one. We still look for a day in America when the many will become one. That's when America will be great. E pluribus unum.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.